All right, so we've got a whole stack of reports and agreements and even some internal memos. And we're going to take a deep dive into cybersecurity in the canton of Vaud, Switzerland. Ready to get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating what they're doing over there. They're not waiting around for some major cyber attack to happen. They're getting ahead of it, setting up this specialized team.
Okay, so kind of a SWAT team, but for cyber.
Yeah, exactly, like a cyber fire brigade, I guess you could say,
Hmm.
to protect their municipalities.
Okay, I like that cyber fire brigade. So the documents are calling it the CSRT, the Computer Security Incident Response Team.
Mhm.
But I'm guessing it's a little more than just a bunch of tech people in a room somewhere.
Right, yeah, it's not just a room full of, computer nerds. It's a full-on collaboration
Hmm.
between cybersecurity experts from the DGNSI, which is like Vaud's IT department. And then you've got the Cantonal Police Cybercrime Unit and even the Cantonal Crisis Management staff. So they're really bringing all these different areas of expertise together.
So they're bringing in the big guns. But why? Why are they going to all this trouble? What's the background?
Well, since 2021, Vaud has had to deal with multiple cyber attacks. And we're not talking about just attacks on like big companies or government agencies. This is schools, essential services, you name it.
So it really hits home that this isn't something that only happens in the movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the methods that these attackers are using are getting more and more complex. That's why Vaud has had to take this multi-layered approach to cybersecurity, emphasizing both prevention and then how to respond when an attack happens.
Okay, let's break that down a little. What does prevention actually look like?
They're focusing on those like basic best practices, the kind of things we always hear about, but it's so easy to overlook, like securing remote access to systems. I mean, who hasn't been working from home more these days?
Yeah.
And then making sure everyone's got strong passwords, not just password 123.
Oof, yeah. I've been guilty of that one myself. But seriously, are those kinds of things enough to stop a really determined attacker?
Well, they're the foundation. I like to think of it like locking your doors at night. Might not stop a truly determined burglar, but it makes you a less appealing target.
That's true.
And Vaud is also really stressing the importance of offline backups, because if your whole system gets locked up with ransomware or something, you need a way to get that data back.
Right, so it's not just about preventing the attack, it's about minimizing the damage if something does get through.
Exactly. And then there's the constant monitoring for any kind of unusual activity. They have this Security Operations Center, or SOC, at the DGNSI. That's basically like their cybersecurity nerve center. They're watching the network traffic 24/7, looking for anything that looks suspicious.
So it's like having a 247 security guard for all your computer systems.
Yeah, you could say that. But then the question is, what happens when that alarm bell does go off? What happens if an attack does get through? Despite all these preventative measures.
Well, that's where our cyber fire brigade jumps into action, right? What does that look like in real time?
So Vaud has this dedicated emergency number for cyber attacks. It's a 117. If a municipality gets hit, that's the number they call. And the Cantonal Police Cybercrime Unit gets involved immediately. They work with that SOC that I mentioned, assess the situation, and figure out what the best course of action is.
So like 911, but for a digital emergency, does the CSRT get called in for every attack?
They actually integrate right into the local crisis team, so they're brought in for situations where you need that higher level of expertise. They might help coordinate communication during the response, or offer technical guidance, even bring in outside contractors.
Contractors.
Yep, for things like forensic analysis.
So they're bringing in private companies.
Yeah, and that's a really important part of their strategy, actually. They realize they can't have all the expertise in-house, so they're building this network of trusted partners in the private sector.
That makes sense. Like calling in specialized firefighters for a chemical fire. You need the right people with the right skills. But all of this has to be pretty expensive. Who's footing the bill for all of this?
The municipalities themselves actually contribute 410,000 Swiss francs every year to cover the core costs of the CROT. Things like salaries for the cybersecurity experts and baseline support from those private contractors.
Okay, so they're investing in their own protection.
Yeah.
But what happens if an attack needs a massive response? Are those extra costs covered too?
That's where it gets interesting. Any additional costs for like extensive technical support or specialized services, those are actually borne by the municipality itself.
Oh, wow. So it's a shared responsibility. The CSRT is like a safety net.
Yeah.
But each municipality ultimately is accountable for its own cybersecurity. That's a pretty big commitment.
Yeah, it is. It definitely raises some interesting questions about how we prioritize and budget for security these days, in this increasingly digital world.
Yeah.
But maybe we can come back to that later. For now, I think it's interesting to shift gears a little and look at what the CSRT does beyond just responding to these attacks. What I find really remarkable is how much they're focused on building up a more resilient community overall.
Okay, I think this is where it starts to get really fascinating. We've talked about the what of the CSCERT, but now let's get into the why. Because it's one thing to have all these experts waiting in the wings, but it's another thing entirely to create a whole culture of cybersecurity awareness. So how do they actually do that? I mean, let's be real. It's not exactly easy to get people excited about things like password managers and software updates. How do they actually do that? I mean, let's be real. It's not exactly easy to get people excited about things like password managers and software updates.
Well, communication is key. They're not just sitting around waiting for people to reach out to them. They've got these channels set up specifically for sharing information and building those relationships.
Okay, give me an example. What does that look like in the real world?
So they've got a dedicated email address for cybersecurity stuff. It's ccert@vd.ch. Anyone can use it for any questions they have, as long as it's not like a real emergency, of course. So if a municipality is worried about a potential threat or something, or they need advice on how to actually implement some of these security measures, they could just shoot off an email to the experts.
So like a help desk, but for cybersecurity.
Pretty much.
But what about when you need information fast? Email can be kind of slow.
Oh, they've got that covered too. They've actually developed a mobile app. It's called Cybersecurity Vaud, and they use it to share important updates and stuff, like announcements about critical vulnerabilities and even upcoming events.
Hold on, a cybersecurity app. That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like having a little cybersecurity advisor right in your pocket.
I like it.
It's a really smart way to reach people. We're all on our phones constantly these days.
Yeah, that's true. But what about the people who aren't so tech savvy? How do they make sure everyone can get the information they need?
So they're working on this online resource center, specifically for the municipalities. It'll have like FAQs and toolkits and templates for press releases, all the practical stuff you could need, all in one place.
Okay, so they're really taking a proactive approach to education and empowerment. But it's not just about handing out information, right? It's about building a sense of community.
Absolutely. And they're doing that in a few different ways. For one thing, they're partnering with organizations like Trust Valley to put on these cybersecurity awareness sessions. They even held one at EPFL's Rolex Forum.
Wow, that's a pretty high-profile venue.
Right. It shows they're serious about this.
But are they just talking to people who are already on board with this stuff? How do they reach the people who aren't really paying attention to this issue?
Well, they're also working with Innovo to host this event called CyberSec Connect. It's going to showcase all these innovative cybersecurity solutions from local companies.
Oh, that's cool. So like a cybersecurity trade show almost.
Exactly. And it gives municipalities a chance to see what's out there and maybe even find some solutions that fit their specific needs.
Okay.
And it really reinforces that idea of collaboration, too. It's not just about the CRC being the only source of knowledge. They want to create a whole network of experts and resources that anyone can use.
So it's a really holistic approach. Education, awareness, community building, collaboration. But let's be realistic for a second. No system is perfect. Even with all these measures in place, there's always the chance that an attack could slip through the cracks.
Yeah, of course. And that's why the CRC operates on what they call a best effort and subsidiarity principle.
Okay, what does that mean?
Basically, they're saying, look, we're committed to doing everything we can to help, but we also have to be realistic about our limitations.
So they're not promising miracles.
Right. Like, for example, they can't save a municipality that doesn't have any data backups.
Ouch.
They can give guidance and support. But at the end of the day, each entity needs to be responsible for its own cybersecurity.
So it's a shared responsibility. The CSRT is there to support and guide, but they can't do all the work for you.
Exactly. It's like having a personal trainer you know. They can show you the ropes and motivate you, but you still have to put in the effort yourself.
It's a good analogy. And it shows that cybersecurity is about more than just technology. It's about people making smart choices and working together to protect their communities.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It sounds like Vaud is really ahead of the curve with all of this. They've recognized that cybersecurity isn't just a tech issue. It's a community issue. And they've created a system that reflects that.
Yeah, what's really impressive to me is how much emphasis they put on collaboration and being proactive. I think it's a model that other communities could really learn from, no matter how big or small they are.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. From the nuts and bolts of this CSIRT to their work on building a more cyber-resilient community, Vaud's approach is really something else. But before we wrap things up, I want to get your final thoughts. What stands out to you the most about all of this?
Yeah, it really is inspiring to see a community like Vaud taking